Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagen. We are back here in Studio 130 for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the gold standard in Iowa conservative entertainment. Once again, as usual, you are listening to John Hendrickson and myself. Good morning, John. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing fine.
Good. Did you stay up late watching election results last night?
I did not. No, I fell asleep early.
Yeah. I didn't. I was there for it. It was... election night is kind of like my personal Super Bowl or whatnot. So I love it. Well, good. Before we get into it, and I don't know if you heard me mention this earlier, I was in here getting ready, getting the studio prepped, and I looked out the window, and our patio had action.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. No,
I didn't
there
hear
was
that.
a group of children out there with a few adults with them, and they had bubbles, soap bubbles.
Oh, yeah.
They were all blowing. And so there was it was very kind of a joyful, festive sort of thing, and all these kids and the bubbles, and it was great.
Nice to see the patio being used.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
So as opposed to the other side of the courtyard, which is the ongoing, maybe we should talk about the construction project, because just as we get the patio done, what we haven't talked about is our neighbors here.
This is like a perpetual New Deal.
It is. So our neighbors here on the other side, not the ping pong side, but the other side, are doing a complete, you like that one, didn't you, John?
Yeah.
So on the other side is a complete down to the studs renovation of their space and an expansion. We went through about a week of demolition during working hours and jackhammers, like literally tearing up concrete, hammer drills, Sawzall right there on the walls. It was a good time.
Yeah.
And then we moved on to at one point actually had our ceiling tiles fall in our space.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's been a really good time. So that is ongoing. It seems to me that they've gotten to be a little more, a little quieter during working hours. So at least while the time that we're recording today, the studio here can be relatively noise free. But we'll try it. So if you hear that going in the background, listeners, you'll know what's going on. It's not our fault. Okay. So when we were last with you, listeners, we were discussing some of the primary elections coming up. And so I think we'd like to just kind of roll through some of these, John. And I don't know if you have some. There's a couple that I do specifically want your take on as we go through this. But so to start off, there were probably 3 contested primaries at the congressional level. One was Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks, incumbent, was primaried by David Pauch, I think was his name. That was a pretty close race.
It was.
Did you see that?
Yes. Yeah.
56-44 for an incumbent to have a race that tight, and I'm not sure that the challenger really spent a lot of money, comparatively speaking.
Yeah.
That surprised me that was that close. It really did. I don't know. Do you have a take on that?
No, I was surprised too, and but I think it. You had mentioned before that Speaker Johnson had come to Iowa City and did an event with her, and I think that kind of shows why he did that.
Yeah,
was that you could be vulnerable in the general. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, but
so the general election will be a rematch with the last. Christina Bohannon, former state representative. I think Christina Bohannon is a very credible challenger. I think that will be a race for a while, but the underlying fundamentals of the district still lean to the right pretty good. Despite having Iowa City in the district, the remainder of it's pretty deep red.
Would it be fair to say that this is maybe a wake-up call for some to maybe be a little more conservative?
It sort of depends. You and I would say yes.
Yeah.
I think others would say, well, you got Iowa City in your district. You need to appeal to suburban voters and so on and so forth. But clearly, there are Republicans that are dissatisfied. I suspect, and I think this goes for when we get to the 4th district, I think having Donald Trump on the ballot and the turnout that he provides and the enthusiasm probably covers over a lot of that.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. I think the district still leans pretty strongly Republican, but we'll keep an eye on it. Here in central Iowa, the 3rd and southwest Iowa, there was a Democrat primary to face Congressman Zach Nunn, so it was Lanon Baccam and Melissa Vine. That got a little dramatic for a while,
yes,
but the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, that sort of runs all that, clearly had a favorite, which was Lanon Baccam, and he won going away.
Yeah, yeah.
So
and he, and certainly the establishment of their party had backed him with the Vilsacks and Rob Sand, and
Democrats are really good at circling the wagons when they decide who they want to have win a race. Then in the 4th district, and we talked about this the other day, John. Which was Congressman Randy Feenstra against Kevin Virgil. Now, in the end, this was a 60-40 win, but still more than you would expect. Well, let me say, you would expect an incumbent congressman to fare a little bit better in a primary, because I don't think this Virgil spent hardly any money. I could be wrong. We don't live in the 4th. But he was backed by former Congressman Steve King, who had been primaried by what? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, that was interesting because he also, I think, if I read the literature that we saw, right, he was also endorsed by Vivek.
That's right. He had it on that handout that we saw. Yeah.
And so there definitely was a challenge from the right. To Congressman Feenstra, and so I'm not surprised that Feenstra won the primary. But I think there is a sense of sort of grassroots conservatives that are a little upset, kind of with some in their own party, and I do think it shows signs of people maybe some officials need to start paying more attention to some of these issues that are going on that people are concerned with.
Well, Virgil certainly ran on America First,
That's
the piece
right,
that we saw. I mean, he was
certainly
proclaiming that trade and immigration and the whole bit. So, and even
right
had
my alley.
What?
Those are my issues.
Yeah, I know. He was certainly Look, if you were a 4th district voter, I think we know where you'd have been, John. And that has nothing to do with Congressman Feenstra. Okay, so at least at this point, the 1st district is more of a likely Republican seat. I think in the 3rd district, I think Zach Nunn is still a favorite. Power of incumbency, it looks like he's won before. The district, I think, still leans to the right just slightly. Yeah. And then Congressman Feenstra should win going away. The 4th district is a fortress for
I think I saw the those reports they have, like the Cook political report showed most of the Iowa districts, if not all, are all leaning Republican.
Now, I'm giving you right now the Hagano political report.
You
could get whatever you want to read, John, but we're trying to give folks the...
That's right,
whatever. All right. Okay. I do want to click through some of the legislative results, because we did talk about this as well, and I think there's some takeaways here for policy and what to expect going forward. So we'll start with some Senate races, and these are on the Republican side, and in no particular order, but and these are ones that I think we mentioned the other day, but Senate District 26, which was Gannon Hendrick and Kara Warme. Gannon Hendrick being a longtime Senate Republican staffer who ran, and Kara Warme won that race, and that really ended up being which county reported, and I think they each from the 2 different counties, but that's a safe Republican seat. And so it's Marshalltown and rural Ames area. That was interesting to me. About a 10-point win. I think the biggest one on the Senate side was Waylon Brown Senator Waylon Brown up in kind of north central Iowa. So this would be Mason City, Osage, that sort of area. I believe Senator Brown has already served 2, maybe 3 terms. I don't remember for sure. But he had a challenger in Doug Campbell who seemed to be largely motivated by the pipeline issue. And so that was a fun one to watch. Well, fun if you're not invested in it.
Yeah.
But Campbell was ahead for a good hour and a half in that race. As it kind of depends on which county came in, but Cerro Gordo in the Mason City area came in early, and he had a pretty big lead. But then as the other, I guess, more rural areas came in, Senator Brown won. So I think I want to hit this in the end, but the issue of the pipeline, and then we're talking about the carbon capture sequestration pipeline business. If I am the movement to stop the pipeline, that's a setback for them to run a race against an incumbent and come short. Although the final result was close, but anyway, any thoughts on that?
I was kind of surprised to see that because Senator Brown has been a consistent conservative vote. Absolutely. And so he's been good on taxes on all the issues, and so but I know people are passionate about the pipeline issue.
Yeah, no, they are, and look, I think you and I both are very pro eminent domain, or anti use of eminent domain, or at least keeping it in its proper use, and not to get into the pipeline issue because it's not our issue, but to see a consistent conservative, and then someone trying to run to the right of that, that's a tight lane, and but. Doug Campbell seemed to have a lot of people helping him, and so sort of a victory for, I guess, the other side of that issue. But I don't think it's fair to put it all on that because Waylon Brown's a good legislator.
Yes,
and I believe he deserved to come back. Okay, we briefly the Cedar Falls, Hudson, LaPorte City area in Blackhawk County. Dave Sires, a three-way primary, had a big win. Still got almost 60% a three-way primary, but that's going to be a tough one in the fall because that's Senator Eric Giddens, and that's I think most folks here at the Hagano Political Report would consider that a toss-up race.
Okay,
going into the fall, so that's who will be up against Senator Giddens. Okay, any thoughts on any of those Senate races? Again, Senate Republicans have a pretty good track record over the last 8 years of getting their folks elected, and so they're good at it.
Yeah,
they run a good operation. Okay, moving on to House races. Click through some of these. The first one would be Mike Sexton, incumbent, chair of the Agriculture Committee, very narrowly won against Wendy Lou Larson. And that was only a 55-vote win, although from personal experience, you don't really start sweating until it's down into the 20s. But but anyway, but it was a 51-49 percentage point win. But again, another well-organized challenger candidate that was trying to, I think,
was that expected? Or
I think a lot of folks I talked to thought that one might actually be a race.
Okay.
So. Yeah, I think again, anytime an incumbent gets a scare like that, that's kind of surprising. But yeah, anyway, so Representative Sexton will be presumably coming back. It's another one of these safe Republican seats. House District 22. This would be Norwalk and Winterset area. This would be was a Republican primary. Former Representative Garrett Gobble, who had represented Ankeny, now lives in the Norwalk area, against Samantha Fett, and that's to fill the seat that had been held by Stan Gustafson. But anyway, Samantha Fett, who I believe is connected with Moms for Liberty.
Yes, yeah.
Again, well organized. I know that that Garrett Gobble worked really hard in that race. That was competitive, tight, but Samantha Fett won that one. Another one that we talked about, John, was down in Osceola. And Sam, I think it's Wingren won, and he was up against Brenda Brammer-Smith, who had been energized as in opposition to what the governor wanted to do on the AEA bill, and I think ESAs. I might be extrapolating that a little too much, but certainly that was a conservative versus moderate battle, and the conservative won on that one. Am I casting that fairly? Do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Going on to, let's see, Ankeny, House District 41, Ryan Weldon against Matthew Smith. I don't think anybody knew what was going to happen in that one, but Ryan Weldon was a former school board member. And if you remember, there was a couple cycles ago, kind of the effort to try and retake some of these school boards, and he was part of that back then. So he won and will face Molly Buck in the fall. So against a Democrat incumbent. That's going to be another battleground race. Mm-hmm. And the Ankeny seats for the past few cycles have kind of flipped back and forth. And those will be very interesting to watch going into the fall. Just where's the environment into these suburban seats coming back into focus? So I'm really curious to watch those as well. This one was interesting. I don't know if you saw this at all. We didn't talk about this before, John. Did you see it in the Josh Meggers race, Representative Meggers?
No, I didn't know about this one till you
were talking about it this morning. So he had been, his opponent in a primary was I believe, a former or current city administrator or finance person who was upset about the property tax bill and so decided to run on raising property taxes, which is always a popular place to be. But what was interesting, I think most folks are pretty confident that Representative Meggers will come back. Great guy, popular in his area. But we're watching the results come in. And look, as we've seen in some of these races, if an incumbent's got a race, it's pretty close, right? It's not going to be a blowout. And the numbers came in, and Meggers is losing like 80-20 in his home county. It's like, well, wait a minute, this can't be right. We'll come to discover there was sort of a glitch in the Secretary of State reporting system. It had the names backwards. So for about 20 or 30 minutes, he's like, Representative Meggers thinks he's lost. And I mean, really upset, rightfully so. Like, what's going on here? And then finally fixed the glitch, and it flips back around. But yeah, that was it
had to cause a lot of anxiety. A lot
of troubling few minutes there. Yeah. So I'm glad to see Representative Meggers coming back. Again, another safe seat. That's Grundy Center area, Fortress Republican area. Along with the Waylon Brown district. So State Representative Jane Bloomingdale won re-election about 60-40. I think that's interesting too. And it shows, again, the power of incumbency. Because I don't think anyone would say that Jane Bloomingdale's the most conservative member of the House Republican caucus. Yeah. I mean, she has been voted against several conservative things over time. But the other thing that Representative Bloomingdale does have is she's a former mayor of Northwood, and she's very popular, and people like Jane. Yeah. She's just a very kind, just a likable person. And in politics, that counts for a lot.
Yes, yeah.
And she connects with people. I had some people that were in the district, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and apparently the city of Northwood was about every other yard had a Bloomingdale sign in it. And so, that's never discount. And it's a reminder, too, that these things are local, and there's issues. We can sit here in Studio 130, John, and think about big thematic philosophical issues. Yeah. You get out across the state of Iowa, and sometimes it's just who they know and other issues. Yeah, and it's hard to know that from our seat here, too. Yep,
absolutely.
I think that was about it, John. So, I mean, what's your takeaway of all that? Is there a, I don't expect all of our listeners to care about each one of those races, but what's the big theme? Do you have a takeaway of all that?
I think if I had one takeaway is that I didn't expect any of the in terms of our congressional delegation, I didn't expect any of them to lose, but I thought their opponents got more votes than I thought they would. Yep. And I think it shows that there's, at the grassroots level, there's more conservatives that are dissatisfied with the status quo. And so I think that's something, and I think even with what we were talking about with the pipeline shows that there is, if we want to call it, rumblings on the right that are going on. And the other thing I think, and I got a text from a few people that they're concerned about turnout, and I think turnout was low because there was, depending on if you had one of these primaries, But I think there was some Republicans that were texting me saying that, they were concerned because there was hardly any people voting. But I don't know. I mean, November is going to be key for turnout, but I don't know if we should take any takeaways from that.
I can understand that. Election, and I understand that. And I think that I would like to have seen turnout higher in some of these races. I'm not sure that for example, here in Dallas County, the only race we had on the ballot was the county attorney's race that was contested. That's not going to get a lot of people out to vote.
No.
It just isn't. Now, a congressional primary, a statewide primary, people are going to engage in that. I still believe that I think on both sides, I think enthusiasm is high for this election this fall.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of cliche to say it's going to be a base election, but look, Republicans especially, we haven't even talked about the criminal case and the conviction of President Trump.
Yeah.
But that seems to have galvanized a lot more of the right. I mean, when you've got J.D. Vance, Ted Cruz, and Susan Collins all singing from the same page of the hymnal.
Yes, that's
like something's going on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I guess my thought is I think Republican turnout will still be very high this fall, and I think it will benefit these races. I'm going to say this. I hear what you're saying on the congressional primaries and even some of the legislative primaries. I think a big winner is the establishment. And the power of incumbency. Yeah. That they won.
Yeah.
And in some of these cases spent a fair amount of money to get people across the finish line. But here's why I'm going to say that I don't think that's such a bad thing. Because what is the establishment giving us here in Iowa? Tax cuts, conservative reforms over and over.
That's true.
The agenda that we come in here and we talk about, and we say, look at the Iowa experiment. Look at what we're doing.
Yeah.
And if the establishment, whatever you want to call that is giving us that, then long may the establishment continue to win in the state of Iowa.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. That's I think on that. I think similarly, I think taxpayers continue to win. And these folks in the open seats, we'll see what these new incoming legislators are like. But I don't see any reason that there's any results here that would keep legislators from continuing to pursue tax reform. So that's a good thing. And as we talked about, we'll see where we go here on the pipeline issue. I think people are passionate about it. I don't know that it really changes it. But I didn't see any of the folks that were championing the eminent domain bills. I mean, they all got reelected last night or will be in the fall. And any of the folks like Senator Brown, I mean, he's coming back and had not taken a vote on that. So I think it's maybe status quo or maybe sets him back a little bit. But anyway, that's kind of my thoughts
and
on all that.
It's interesting, and I forget the challenger's name, but you mentioned the local government official that was running to defend property tax increases. I mean if there's one issue that Iowans are fed up on, it's property taxes. And
I agree, and I think that cuts across party lines.
Yes,
I truly, and I know we talked a lot about Republican primaries on today when we were going over this, and not to say that Democrats are litigating their primaries on property taxes. It's other issues, whatever, opposing the Republicans. But that's a 70+% issue is property tax reform. Frankly, I would be surprised if, I wouldn't want to be a property tax raising Democrat either. No. I think on either party, I think you need to be able to speak to what you intend to do to control the growth in Iowa's property taxes, especially so on the Republican side. And taking this position of home rule or local control, Iowans don't want to hear that.
No.
Iowans want to hear what you're going to do to solve their problem.
That's right.
And preaching to them about home rule is not a solution.
No.
That's just more of the same, and more of the same in working.
Yeah.
So,
and the legislature responded. I mean, they, people wanted something done, and they at least started something.
That's right.
To respond to the property tax problem. It's more than what's going on at the local level.
And I'll tell you, okay, the jury is still out on exactly what impacts that bill is going to have over the long haul. And I think they're going to come back and do some more work on it. But here is what the evidence that I take that it's having an impact because of how much local government's complaining about it.
Yes, yeah.
If they thought that this was just fine and didn't do anything, they'd probably be saying, great job, legislature. I'm glad you fixed the problem and we don't need to do anything else. But that's not the answer. They somehow have deluded themselves into thinking that the legislature is going to back up and undo some things. So, anyway, so I think that's right. Taxpayers win, and that's what we like to see. All right, turning from local elections, John. Now we're going to get to the main event. What would you really like to talk about today?
Well, I just thought it was interesting because there's our friends across the Atlantic are going to have an election July 4th, I think, isn't it?
Is it really?
I think so, yeah. I could be wrong. I think it's in July, but England's going to have an election, and it may not be so good for the Conservative Party, the Tories, but one interesting development is that Nigel Farage, the leader of Brexit, has come back and is running as a candidate for Parliament. And I should have wrote the name of the party. It's not UKIP now. It's a Reform. Is it Reform Britain?
Something like that.
But he's stepped into the leadership of that party and will be a candidate for Parliament under that party banner and is leading. And of course, a lot of Tories are upset because they think he's going to be a spoiler. But I listened to his speech, and he said basically the Tories have failed on immigration. They failed on taxes. They failed on a whole host of issues, and frankly, he's right. And he said one thing that was quite alarming. And for example, we're June 6th is coming up for D-Day, and for example, Farage in his speech said that most people in England don't even know what D-Day is anymore, and he said that's just horrible. And what's happening to society there, and of course, England is just like the United States is in a crisis with immigration, and so I think Farage, I don't know, I've always respected what he's done, and
this will be interesting because, and I don't necessarily want to pass myself off as an expert on British politics, but there's several forces at play there. One is the Tories, the right of center party. I don't want to call them a conservative party, but they're in power, and the economy worldwide hasn't been great the last few years, and people typically blame the party in power. So I think they're favored to lose substantial seats. I don't know what the read is on whether they'll lose control of Parliament or not. So that economic force then. But across the Western world, you have a rise in populist, maybe nationalist movements, and so that would seem to benefit. You're certainly seeing in Central and Eastern Europe a rise of those kinds of forces that would be more of a Nigel Farage sense. But at the same, I saw the other day that public sentiment towards Brexit, if you had the vote to do over again, Brexit would have failed. And I think there's public opinion on Brexit has moved. And I don't know that being the guy that championed Brexit is quite the calling card that it would have been a few years ago. So anyway, it is fascinating because I think that's something that, like I said, across the, the Western world, or however you want to phrase that, watching what happens with some of these leaders, because it's not just that movement. I think where the center, the political, I don't know, things are moving and they're developing. And here in America, we just think of Donald Trump and the Donald Trump movement. But this is something that's happening across the world. And it's not all downstream from Trump.
No.
It is a movement. But here in America, Donald Trump is the person that has sort of championed that. But in other places of the world, it's a Nigel Farage, or it's blanking on Hungary, but you know what I mean. So these are happening, and
Orban,
Viktor Orban, or Bolsonaro in Brazil, or so this isn't. It's not unique to us, but it is a shift, and it's probably the most significant shift overall of political forces, probably in the post-World War II era.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated by all of it, and we'll see what happens.
And I think it forces a debate on some of these issues like immigration and trade and foreign policy that we do need.
Yeah.
And,
well, we know because we have been talking about this. We've looked at data on this, John, that public sentiment on trade and immigration is evolving rapidly.
Absolutely.
And specifically that we talked about on trade is you're seeing even President Biden moving towards a more protectionist spot on trade. Now, obviously that's election year kinds of things, but that's matching where public opinion is and knowing that, you know, that hardcore free trade position across the board, frankly, isn't where most Americans are at.
Yep.
So, okay. Well, great. Well, that's fun stuff, John. We are out of time, so we're going to wrap it up. But again, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.